At 1500 hours, the sky over Baghdad fills with the roar of 72 F-16 fighters, the largest single strike this jet has ever flown in broad daylight. Among them sits Stroke 3, flown by Major Emmett E.T Tullia, part of a formation aimed straight at the capital's downtown core. For the first minute and a half, the mission looks routine. Then the warning tone in his headset kicks on and refuses to quit. What the pilot doesn't know, what nothing in the cockpit will ever tell him, is that the very box built to keep him alive has already failed silently. And below him, a city that has spent 10 years rehearsing for exactly this moment is about to open fire. Ahead of him, the formation rolls into a sky already thick with smoke and tracers. Specialized jamming aircraft work the airwaves, burying Iraqi radar screens in static, while dedicated defense suppression jets fire anti-radar missiles at anything foolish enough to light up its scope. But Baghdad sits behind the thickest air defense screen anyone has flown into since the Vietnam War. More than 50 surface-to-air missile batteries and thousands of anti-aircraft guns wait below, and the handful of American jets assigned to jam and suppress simply can't blanket it all. Stroke 3 is riding one of the aircraft chosen to punch in deepest, fitted with newer, more powerful engines meant to haul heavier loads into the worst of the defenses. The very upgrade that makes his jet special is the same one steering him into the hottest patch of sky over the whole city. The aerial refueling on the way in had fought through a wall of storm clouds and crosswind, and the formation stretched out so badly that the last 4 jets in line were ordered home, too far behind to ever catch up before the target. Worse, Iraqi defenders already knew the strike package was inbound. They lit their oil smoke screens early to blind the bombers to the targets underneath, and that early ignition told the whole story. They'd timed the burn before the formation even crossed overhead, meaning their warning network had tracked this raid from a long way out. The jamming aircraft can't cover every frequency, and one ground radar south of the river has already found Stroke 3. He noses below the cloud deck, hunting for the Dora oil refinery near a bend in the Euphrates River. At this moment, the jet is in solid shape. Just over 15,000 feet, 480 knots, 2 heavy bombs still slung under the wings, and enough fuel for the bomb run, plus roughly 12 more minutes of hard combat maneuvering before the tanks run dry. Over the next 4 minutes, every one of those numbers gets pushed to the ragged edge of what the airframe and the man flying it can survive. The tone in his headset breaks into a hard, rolling warble, the signal that a missile guidance radar has locked on, not just a search radar sweeping past out of curiosity. Below and south of the river, something that looks like a telephone pole tears free of the ground and climbs hard toward the formation. He holds his turn to the last possible second, then hauls the jet into a violent brake. The G-force slams him back into the seat, the harness digging into his shoulders, his cheeks dragged sideways. The missile sails past and detonates harmlessly in the empty air behind him. That warning tone comes from the jet's radar warning receiver, the system that listens for enemy tracking radars and tells the pilot exactly what's hunting him and from which direction, all through pitch changes in the tone and a symbol glowing on a small scope by his knee. Think of it like a smoke detector that gives one chirp for burnt toast and a completely different scream for a house fire. And the note he just heard was the house fire scream, the one that means a missile is actively riding a radar beam toward him. For most pilots caught in that tone, the instinct is immediate: throw out countermeasures. He has no idea yet that his countermeasures are the one system that isn't going to answer. What just missed him was a Cold War-era radar-guided missile system, an aging design roughly 35 feet long, weighing well over 2,000 kilograms at launch, capable of nearly 3.5 times the speed of sound, with a reach of over 30 kilometers, easily the distance between 2 neighboring American cities, closed in under 15 seconds. Its warhead carries almost 200 kilograms of fragmentation, fused to detonate within about 65 meters of the target, so it never has to actually connect. A ground radar van steers it the entire way to impact by remote control. The missile's speed is monstrous, closing the gap to a formation in seconds, but its steering is clumsy, unable to follow a tight brake once a pilot forces it to commit. It flies like a freight train someone's trying to steer with a joystick, and the way you beat it is by luring it into committing to your turn, then braking late enough that it can't hold the lead angle it needs to stay with you. Down on the ground, the missile crew works equipment older than the pilot they're trying to kill. A radar van, a cluster of launch rails, missiles so large they have to be hoisted upright like flagpoles, slow to reload between shots. But at this range, speed doesn't matter. All they needed was a few straight seconds from the formation, and somebody up there just gave it to them. His hand had gone for the countermeasures switch in the middle of that break. Nothing left the jet. Not one bundle, not one flare, but the maneuver alone worked. So he flies clear and keeps moving, too consumed with staying alive to notice the one fact that would change how he flies every second from here forward. The equipment meant to save his life is doing absolutely nothing. The plan had looked clean back in the briefing room. It looks a lot less clean over a capital that's already endured 2 days of bombing and is now wide awake, where every gun crew and missile team on the ground has already picked out which aircraft they want. Break off the run now and the bombs scatter wide, and the whole mission was wasted, meaning he comes back tomorrow and does this all over again. So he pushes through the run anyway, through the warble, through missile launches climbing straight at him. The targeting reticle in his heads-up display tracks the refinery, and 2 massive 2,000-pound bombs release from the rails. Behind him, the refinery erupts into a column of fire and black smoke as he banks away. Most of the formation ahead of him had watched their own targeting screens smear into a grey haze from the smoke cover and never found a clean aim point. They turned away empty-handed. He flew through it and delivered. The bombing system guiding this run works by having the jet's onboard computer track a moving aim point across the ground and release the weapons the instant the calculated line says now. Those bombs carry no laser guidance, no satellite guidance, nothing but gravity pulling dumb steel to the ground. The pilot has to fly the entire aircraft onto the target, holding it dead straight while a countdown runs, at precisely the moment every instinct screams to jink and dodge. It's like threading a needle while someone shakes the table, except the table is moving at 500 knots and the people shaking it are armed with live missiles. He held it steady at the worst possible second, coming in shallower than doctrine recommends, and somehow it worked anyway. 2 more tones stack on top of each other almost immediately. The ground radars that had gone quiet during his bomb run come alive again the instant he rolls off target. This time he's ready. He punches the switch to throw countermeasures into his turn. Nothing happens. No decoy cloud, no flare, nothing leaves the jet. He's flying naked through the break, with only the airframe itself left to protect him. He hits the switch again, harder. Still nothing, and he still has no idea. Tucked into a flush panel under the belly sits the dispenser system responsible for exactly this. Metal strip decoys in one bank of cells to hand an enemy radar a bigger, juicier false target than the jet itself, and superheated flares in the other bank to give a heat-seeking missile something hotter than the engine to chase instead. Each cartridge fires off a tiny electrical charge, a jolt of voltage that kicks it physically out of its cell, not unlike the click of a lighter sparking gas. That jolt has to first pass through a safety switch the ground crew sets by hand before takeoff. Flip it wrong, and not a single cartridge in the entire dispenser will ever fire. This strike package had been thrown together overnight, crews briefed only hours before engine start, weapons and defensive systems armed in a hurry. Somewhere in that scramble, the firing circuit lost power, and the charges never got their jolt. He thumbs the switch 3 separate times. Nothing. The panel still reads ready every time. No warning light, no caution tone, nothing to tell him his automatic defenses no longer exist. He flies on, trusting a jet that has quietly stopped protecting him. From here forward, the only thing standing between stroke 3 and a live warhead is his own 2 hands on the control stick. A modern aircraft built decades later would have caught the fault and flashed a warning before he ever left the runway. But this is 1991, and the technology of the day has no way to tell him the cupboard is bare. On the ground, the missile crews aren't rattled. They've drilled the flight corridors, the altitudes, and the timing for exactly this scenario. And they know a jet holding straight through a bomb run is a jet that has temporarily stopped maneuvering. A battery commander watches the formation thread through his sights, and once the jamming thins out enough, he stops firing blind and starts walking missiles, one at a time, onto a jet he can actually see. Stroke 3 has now beaten 2 launches, both purely by flying the aircraft. What he still doesn't know is that flying is the only tool left in his kit, that every break from here forward has to be earned in the air, not jammed, not decoyed, just flown. Then the radio delivers the worst news of the whole morning. The defense suppression jets are calling minimum fuel and turning for the tankers, pulling the anti-radar shooters completely out of the fight. The instant they leave, every Iraqi radar operator who'd been flinching under threat of a return shot stops flinching. They leave their radars locked on and guide every missile they have left. The volume of fire rising over downtown spikes straight up. A new tone cuts in, lower pitch, a different radar, a different missile entirely, and he doesn't even get a second to study it because his wingman is already shouting over the radio to break southeast immediately. That call comes from Stroke 4, reading a launch off his own instruments and calling it the instant he sees it. Because when your wingman calls a break, you break first and ask questions once you're both still alive. 3 missiles flash past directly underneath, detonating exactly where he would have been. That single radio call just saved his life, and it reframes everything that happened before it. The 2 missiles he'd already dodged alone hadn't proven he was reading the sky better than anyone else. He simply hadn't yet met the shot he couldn't see coming on his own. This missile system fires in salvos of 3, so every direction you turn to dodge one still leaves another one waiting. This was a shorter range, faster reacting missile the Soviets had specifically designed after the earlier one to catch low, fast, jinking jets that the older missile could never keep pace with. Guided by its own dedicated tracking radar. Where the first missile reached high after heavy bombers, this one was purpose-built for the weeds down low. Exactly the slice of sky Stroke 3 is now trapped in. Beating each of these comes down to a single maneuver, the last-ditch break. Holding your turn to the absolute last possible instant to force the missile into an overshoot it physically cannot recover from. Pull too early and it simply follows you around the corner. Pull too late and none of your skill matters anymore. If the first missile was the big brute chasing you down a hallway, this one is the quick one waiting around the corner. Smaller, lower, built to change direction right alongside you instead of lumbering after you like its predecessor. You cannot simply outturn it lazily. The timing has to be exact, and his was exact only because someone else was watching his back. That someone is flying a few miles off his wing. In 1991, there's no shared data link, no screen quietly displaying everyone's picture of the fight in real time. A pilot flying decades later gets the entire sky rendered on a display in front of him. Every other aircraft showing up live, like tracking traffic on a map. These 2 men have only their eyes and a radio, and that's the entire system keeping them alive. The only thing holding a 2-ship flight together is one man watching the other's back and saying so out loud when it matters. The tones keep stacking, one threat barely clearing before the next one calls in. Every hard break costs him speed and altitude he never gets back. The jet feels heavy now, sluggish, mushy on the controls, exactly when he needs it razor sharp. He's dropped down through 9,500 feet, each hard break bleeding off another 600 to 800 feet of altitude. The gun engagement zone, running from about 10,000 feet down to the rooftops, has been clawing at him since the moment he broke against the last missile, and there isn't much sky left above the streets. He punches off both external fuel tanks, and the jet instantly comes alive. Those tanks had been hundreds of pounds of dead weight and a face full of extra drag, slowing him down the entire time. Dumping them is the difference between sprinting through a park while carrying a bag of groceries and dropping the bag mid-stride. The jet rolls quicker, turns tighter, answers the stick the way the engineers always promised it would. The catch is, those same tanks were carrying fuel he's going to want badly on the flight home. A problem at least for a pilot who actually makes it back. 2 different missile families beaten now, and every single turn has cost him something. Altitude burned off in the brake, speed burned off in the pull, fuel now sitting in tanks somewhere on the streets of Baghdad instead of in his wings. The deadliest radar system in the entire city hasn't spoken yet, and when it finally does, nothing he's learned in the last 4 minutes is going to help him. Miss one break against this one, with no decoys left to throw, and there's nothing left to save him. A new tone fills the headset, and this one is different. Steady, continuous, not the search then lock rhythm of the others. A radar has found him and has no intention of looking anywhere else. He brakes as hard as the airframe will physically pull. The missile turns with him. It doesn't sail past the way the others did. It stays glued to the turn, closing the distance. He's soaked through his flight suit now, his oxygen mask slick against his face, his neck straining just to hold his head upright against the load. Then it streaks past, so close he hears the rocket motor scream through the canopy over the sound of his own engine. That's how close it came. The reason this one stayed locked when the others didn't comes down to semi-active radar guidance. The ground radar floods the jet with energy, and the missile simply rides the reflection all the way to impact, closing at nearly 3 times the speed of sound on its own ramjet engine. It doesn't even need to hit him directly. A proximity fuse triggers the instant it gets close enough, and the warhead throws lethal fragments through everything within several yards. A near miss is still a very bad day. Picture a flashlight and a mirror in a dark room. The radar holds a beam on the target, and the missile chases the reflected glare. The only way to break that chain is to put something solid between yourself and the beam. Decoy chaff would have done exactly that. A cloud of metal grabbing the beam and pulling the reflection off the jet entirely. He has none left to throw. Here's the detail every war movie gets wrong. The moment a pilot forces a missile past him into an overshoot, that missile is finished. It doesn't loop back for a second pass. It just flies off stupidly into the distance and eventually burns out. Stroke 3 isn't being chased by one missile, circling like an angry hornet. He's being fired at repeatedly, each shot its own separate launch, each one a single swing of a hammer. Survive the swing, and it's gone for good. The trouble is, the hammers keep coming, one after another, from batteries scattered across the whole city. He reads each threat off a warbling tone and a streak of smoke, and decides which way to break in under a second. On the ground, that missile crew gets nothing back in return. No jamming, no decoys, nothing thrown up to spoil the lock. From where they're sitting, it has to look maddening. A clean lock, a good missile in the air, and a target that keeps slipping the noose by inches every single time. They did everything the manual asked of them. Set the trap, sprang it, fired clean, and a jet with 0 countermeasures left keeps walking out of it on raw flying alone. So they reload and try again, certain the next shot finally connects. Another tone bites in right behind the last one. He's breathing hard now, grunting through the radio between calls. The G-meter climbs as he hauls into yet another turn, 6.5 Gs. At that load, the force drags everything in his body down toward his legs, draining blood from his head until his vision narrows to a grey tunnel, the whole world shrinking down to the view through a cardboard tube. At 6.5 Gs, his arms weigh nearly 40 pounds each, and blinking becomes a genuine effort. Grey out for even a moment at this altitude, and the jet flies itself straight into the city below. There's no autopilot to catch the mistake, just the man and whatever strength he has left. He's beaten the worst of it, and it's cost him nearly everything he had. Slow, low, almost out of sky to maneuver in. Anyone who's ever had to make a split-second call under pressure, with no time to think it through and no one else who could make it for him, might recognize something of themselves in this moment. The only way out now is down, into the one layer of sky every other pilot in the formation is fighting to stay above. Stay up here, and the next radar lock finishes what the others couldn't. He's out of options at altitude, so he does the only thing left. He dives straight for the wall of black smoke hanging below him, knowing exactly what waits inside it. Down low, that dirty band of sky around 10 to 12,000 feet belongs to the anti-aircraft guns, a ceiling of shrapnel thrown up by batteries that aren't tracking anything specific, just filling a block of airspace with hot metal and hoping a jet blunders into it. The floor down there is lava, and the lava fires straight up. He has to punch through the very layer that's been keeping the rest of the formation pinned up high, because the radar-guided missiles above are the deadlier problem, and diving is the only way left to build the speed he needs to escape. He trades altitude for airspeed the way every fighter pilot eventually learns to, spending one to buy the other. Lower means thicker gunfire. Faster means clearing all of it that much sooner. The math gets worked out in half a second because the only other option is staying up where the missiles still are. Somewhere in the dive, the last radar lock breaks. The tones cut out entirely. Whatever's been chewing on him for the past several minutes has finally lost the thread, and the headset goes silent for the first time in what feels like an hour, though the entire engagement lasted barely 4 minutes over the single most heavily defended capital city on the planet. Not that anyone caught inside that 4 minutes could have told you it was only 4 minutes. Now he's traded one problem for another. He needs speed to climb back out and run for the border, and the afterburner that would give it to him drinks fuel he no longer has, most of it punched off along with the tanks earlier. The one tool that solves this problem is the one tool he genuinely cannot afford to use. So he gambles. Throttle up to full military power, dry thrust just short of the afterburner he can't light, hoping it's enough to claw back the airspeed and climb clear of the gunfire. It's the kind of bet that ends careers when it goes wrong. He makes it without a second to spare, and it's barely enough. The jet accelerates, the nose comes up, and stroke 4 slides back into position off his wing to walk him out toward the tankers waiting south of the border. Stroke 3 climbs into clean air at last, the burning city finally sliding off his tail. Back on the ground at the recovery base, the ground crew that meets the jet walks its length and finds the decoy dispensers still completely full, every single cartridge seated exactly where it started, still waiting on a firing pulse that never came. He had just flown the most dangerous 4 minutes of the entire war with a defensive system that had failed before he ever crossed into hostile airspace, and he never knew it until a crew chief pointed it out to him standing on the tarmac. It raises a question worth sitting with. How many of the split-second decisions we trust every day, in a car, at work, anywhere the stakes feel real, are actually resting on equipment or people we assume are backing us up, when in fact we're already on our own and just don't know it yet? Instructors still show this footage in training today, and it remains one of the clearest examples on record of a pilot beating a radar-guided missile with absolutely nothing but the airplane and his own nerve.